Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. According to Monday, August 25th teasers for The Young and the Restless, Victor Newman will be carrying out an extortion scheme while Billy Abbott will hire a private investigator. There will be a lot going on in Monday's thrilling show since Adam Newman's plan will also be turned down. Nick Newman will defend Victor's alliance proposal to Adam at the Newman Ranch. Adam will believe it would be more effective to simply confront the Kane Ashby threat directly. Nick is unwilling to work with Adam to persuade Victor, even though Adam will want them to. Rather, Nick will encourage Adam to believe their father because Victor has a scheme involving a find at the chateau. Fans of YNR might remember that while Nick was imprisoned with Sharon Newman, he discovered some information about the prior estate owner. In order to put Kane in a difficult situation in Monday's episode, Victor had his team look more closely into who had previously owned the castle and vineyard. Victor will throw Kane an envelope on the train and make an irresistible proposition. The last will and testament of the elderly woman who was Colin Atkinson's last con victim will be contained in a letter inside. Victor will have proof of all this since Colin reportedly tricked this affluent woman into giving the chateau and vineyard to his last known alias. Given that his empire was ostensibly founded on Colin's illicit funds, it will appear like Kane was engaged if it is revealed, which would damage it. Victor will threaten to make this information public and exclude Kane from GC permanently unless he receives Kane's cooperation against Jack Abbott and Jabot. Kane will appear prepared to accept Victor's win and turn into his ally after realizing he is being extorted. Lily Winters will prophesy that Holden Novak will regret accepting Kane's employment offer after learning of it in the park. Lily will also criticize Holden since he will appear aloof over Damien Kane's passing. Holden will admit that their friendship soured around the time they arrived in Genoa City, even though he would maintain that he really apologizes for what happened to Damien. Holden became aware that Damien did not view him as an equal at that point. Lily will only want the specifics of Kane's ambitious plan, despite Holden's best efforts to encourage her to talk about her own predicament with him. Lily will find it difficult to accept Holden's claim that he is in the dark. Billy will watch with admiration while Sally Spectra tries on clothes that she might wear to the launch party at his house. Billy and Sally will sit on the couch as Billy chooses his favorite and strips down. As it happens, Billy will also employ a private detective to follow Kane about and provide updates. Billy will reassure her, but Sally will be worried that Kane might figure out what's happening. Billy will feel as though his plan to have Kane watched is already paying off when his PI calls to provide details regarding Victor's visit to Kane's train. According to previews for The Young and the Restless, Kane still has some tricks up his sleeve, so his adversaries shouldn't underestimate him. Although Billy had always trusted his gut, he had recently been plagued by the thought that there were too many secrets circulating in Genoa City, secrets that, if unchecked, could harm him, Victoria, and their children. He wasn't stupid enough to think that just because someone smiled in public, they had ceased muttering behind closed doors. For this reason, he secretly engaged a private investigator who could delve into the shadows without revealing them to the influential individuals who lived there and who had no connection to Chancellor Winters or the Newman family. Billy wasn't initially searching for dirt in order to exact retribution. In a world where lies may be quickly disguised as fact, he needed clarity and a sense of stability. He convinced himself that it was for his safety, security, and sanity, but there was also a darker side of him that delighted in the pursuit of what others were frantically trying to conceal. Working in secret, the investigator only provided Billy with updates and bits of information that, while initially seemingly routine, gradually started to construct a much more comprehensive picture. Back rooms were used for meetings. Transactions that weren't quite consistent with their official documentation. Names too frequently encountered to be coincidental. One link led to another until Billy started to see that Victor Newman was once more altering results while keeping his own hands clean by pulling strings that no one else could see. It was almost Victor's hallmark, so Billy wasn't shocked. However, things were different this time. Victor wasn't merely attempting to preserve his empire or scheming for influence within Newman Enterprises. His hold on people's private lives was growing stronger as he used his knowledge to influence them. In order to ensure that no one ventured to cross the line without suffering the consequences, he was extorting both his family and his adversaries. The revelation chilled Billy to the bone. He had always been perceived by Victor as impetuous, careless, and an unreliable gambler, but what Billy now witnessed was much worse than anything Victor had ever said about him. Victor was making use of his influence on several individuals in the community. The investigator verified rumors of covert threats, including authorities who conveniently altered their minds, businesses who abruptly backed out of agreements, and even Adam's close associates who appeared to be immobilized by dread. Victor only needed to remind someone of what he knew. He didn't need to shout to get control of the room. Billy wondered if anyone else was entangled in the web because it was subtle yet effective. The more he considered it, the more he felt like he was on the verge of obsession, mentally reliving scenes and picturing the consequences of the truth coming to light. Adam Newman, meantime, was battling his own issues, which weren't any simpler to conquer. He had devised a plan, one that he felt would at last establish his worth to everyone who had ever questioned him, even his father. Adam's life had been a cycle of failures and second chances, with opportunities for redemption hovering just out of reach only to be abruptly taken away. But this time, certain that Victor would recognize the genius in his concept, he had planned every step, every risk, and every perspective. Adam expected a confrontation when he entered his father's office, but he also expected Victor to recognize the boldness of the plan, albeit reluctantly. Rather, he received rejection, severe, icy, and unalterable. Victor dismissed the idea as though it were a silly child's fantasy and didn't even consider it. Adam felt as though the door to the Newman dynasty had been shut in his face once more, and he was struggling to control his rage. He made an effort to justify and clarify that the idea was strategic rather than rash, and that it would even help the family business, but Victor wouldn't listen. From his perspective, Adam's proposal was just another plot disguised as ambition. Adam wasn't prepared to acknowledge the rejection aloud, but it hurt. It was about belonging and gaining the acceptance he had been seeking for what seemed like his whole life, not simply about business. Adam was the one who was rejected when Victor fired him, not just the proposal. Adam was left smoldering by the fallout, prowling the Newman Tower's hallways like a confined animal. His mind became resentful, reliving all the times he had attempted to act morally only to be dismissed. Beneath the blazing wrath was something even more sinister, desolation. He questioned whether he would ever be more than Victor's letdown, the son who, despite his best efforts, would never measure up. Nevertheless, Adam was unable to abandon the plan, even in the face of rejection. He had too much faith in it. Perhaps he had to find another way to make it work if Victor wouldn't back him, even if it meant leaving the family completely. Billy's investigator continued to provide him with bits of information at the same time, some of which coincidentally touched on Adam's difficulties. It became evident that Victor's extortion was about more than simply business, and Billy recognized that the web was wider than he had initially thought. He had been utilizing his power to enclose Adam, so that no matter what scheme Adam came up with, the walls would enclose him before he could carry it out. Victor wasn't just dismissing Adam's ideas, he was actively working to undermine them and ensure that Adam had no other options than the one Victor had selected for him. Billy was torn between bitter satisfaction and indignation at this revelation. A part of him wanted to reveal Victor's deceit so Adam could understand how his father really worked. However, another aspect hinted that Adam wasn't quite a helpless victim either, and Billy would benefit from witnessing the Newman family's disintegration. Billy's digging got riskier the longer he continued. He was cautioned by his investigator that they were approaching too closely, that Victor's people were beginning to take note, and that it would not be long before someone linked the queries to him. Billy couldn't stop now, though. It was as though he had been given a jigsaw to solve, with each piece fitting into position until the final image was revealed. He saw Victor Newman, a man who would stop at nothing to hold on to his reign, even if it meant putting his own children under the strain of his demands. Billy was feeling more and more tempted to bring Victor down, but the risk was also increasing. Billy wouldn't be the only target of revenge if Victor found out. It might affect everyone he held dear. Adam, however, was in a downward spiral. He was more vulnerable than he had thought when his plan was rejected, and as he attempted to regain what little confidence he still had, he started to feel like forces without his control were against him. Deals that he believed to be safe abruptly fell through. His trusted contacts turned aloof and refused to answer his calls. Everything he had constructed seemed to be being taken apart, brick by brick, by an unseen hand. Adam had a gut feeling it was his father, but proving it was another story. Even worse, he didn't know how far Victor would go this time. The complex web of criminal activity and interpersonal relationships that characterizes the story of Victor's extortion, Billy's private investigator, and Adam's abandoned plan is not just a series of incidents, rather, it is a profound examination of power, desperation, and the cyclical nature of moral compromise. Despite their apparent separation, these three threads are inseparable, with each serving as a trigger for the others, resulting in a self-reinforcing cycle of conflict and repercussion that exposes the underlying weaknesses and goals of the characters. Understanding one entails understanding the others since they constitute a triangle of action and reaction, each of which is a desperate attempt to gain control in a society where power is the most valuable and elusive resource. Billy's choice to engage a private investigator may have been the catalyst for this cycle. Billy's unique psychology is evident in this move, which is usually made from a position of weakness disguised as proactive power. He is a character who believes in information, systems, and the power that comes from hard, unvarnished truths. He uses calculated intelligence rather than physical force. Hiring the PI is more of a reconnaissance exercise than an act of aggression. His goal is to map the terrain of his adversary and learn about the hidden weaknesses of individuals he considers to be threats or impediments, most especially Victor. Although the motivation behind this action is defensive, to safeguard his interests, his company, and his reputation, its execution is fundamentally offensive because it entails intrusive delving into another person's personal affairs. Billy uses the investigator as his digital age oracle, a way to see without being noticed and to know without showing his hand. Billy gains a false sense of security and a sensation of being one step ahead as a result. But the seeds for the next escalation are sown by the mere act of collecting intelligence. Billy's exploration of Victor's world invariably reveals or threatens to reveal knowledge that Victor views as sacred or, more realistically, harmful. The investigator is a silent observer at Victor's feast, a ghost whose existence is seen as a grave transgression once it is suspected or found. In addition to eliminating the immediate risk of exposure, this infraction necessitates a response in order to restore authority and penalize the offender. That answer is Victor's extortion plan. Born from a different psychological framework than Billy's methodical investigation, it is a classic countermove. Victor desires submission, but Billy seeks information. This is a world of direct authority, overt threats, and real-world repercussions. Extortion is a display of dominance rather than just a transaction. This system is intended to accomplish more than simply obtain resources. It is also intended to control, humiliate, and create a generalized fear. Victor would try to turn Billy's spying against him rather than just stop it if he found out or had a strong suspicion that he was doing it. In this sense, the extortion plot is a brilliant move. It turns Billy's tool, the search for damning information, into his own constraints. Victor totally reverses the situation by threatening to divulge something even more damaging or by specifically addressing a weakness the investigator could have unintentionally exposed. He shows that Victor's willingness to use force is far greater than the authority Billy sought through secret means. This behavior is motivated by a deep-seated urge to preserve a position of ultimate authority. The message conveyed by the extortion is, "Your attempts to understand my world have only given me the key to yours. Your intelligence operation has only made you more vulnerable to me." It is a punishing mechanism that guarantees Billy's probe will result in active and continuous subordination rather than merely failure. Billy believed he was rerouting the flow of power toward himself, but now it is being pushed back at him with interest. Adam's rejected idea is created under the crushing pressure of this extortion. Adam frequently stands for a different archetype, such as the pragmatic, the strategic, or even the moral conscience that is trying to figure out a workable solution in an immoral circumstance. He is caught in the crossfire, and the result of this conflict between Billy and Victor will determine his own destiny. Adam comes up with a solution after seeing Billy get paralyzed and humiliated by Victor's plot. This strategy is essential to comprehending the cycle's depth of theme. It is most likely a strategy for damage control, mitigation, or a difficult crisis management process rather than for a clear victory. A counterproposal, a risky attempt to win over a third party, a complicated financial ploy, or even a grudging suggestion to give in to Victor's demands on certain conditions in order to survive and fight another day might all be part of it. Adam's plan, a logical flowchart intended to identify the least bad alternative among a range of awful options, most likely originated out of reason rather than emotion. Therefore, one of the most important points in the entire sequence is its rejection. Billy brushes it off after being hurt by Victor's attack and acting out of wounded pride and growing panic. There are several facets to this rejection. It is an emotional rejection of reason. It is an immediacy-driven rejection of patience. At a time when the leader's authority seems most endangered, it is a rejection of a subordinate's advice. Despite how naive that claim may be, Billy reasserts his own agency by turning down Adam's plan. He conveys that, even if his destiny is ruin, only he will be responsible for it. Since it cuts off a possible escape route from the deadly cycle, this moment further intensifies the tragedy. The refusal indicates that pride and fear will be used to escalate the conflict rather than using reason to defuse it. The ramifications of this refusal are extensive. It further isolates Billy, to start. He alienates a possible ally and validates Adam's decline into a lonely, hopeless state by rejecting his advice. Secondly, it compels Adam to reconsider his own role and allegiances. He now has fewer options and must think about his own survival in a world that has been formed by Victor's hostility and Billy's stubbornness since his workable answer was rejected. Is he willing to stay on a sinking ship? Does he try to get around Billy? Or does he pursue his own goals and, in a sense, emerge as a new character in the drama? The plan's rejection only adds another, more intricate layer to the game, it doesn't finish it. Above all, Billy's denial of Adam's sensible answer leaves a void, and nature, particularly human nature in a crime story, hates a void. Billy is compelled to redouble his initial approach, more research, more leverage, and more covert actions, because he has no practical way out. He might give his private investigator a riskier job that goes straight to the core of Victor's extortion scheme. Or, feeling trapped and helpless, he might completely give up on the investigator and think of a more straightforward and brutal response, similar to Victor's own strategies but without Victor's natural ruthlessness and experience. The plan's rejection ensures that the cycle continues and gets faster, even though it had an opportunity to end it. Victor responds harshly, Billy acts more recklessly, and Adam is left to deal with the growing fallout, his own future growing more complicated and uncertain. This trio of actions creates the ideal conflict Ouroboros. Victor becomes extorted as a result of Billy's inquiry. The issue that calls for Adam's proposal is brought on by Victor's extortion. The path to de-escalation is eliminated when Billy rejects Adam's idea, which leads Billy to act in desperation or conduct even more provocative investigations, which in turn causes Victor to respond even more brutally, and so on. Adam's pragmatic reason, which is made useless in a world ruled by unbridled ID and ego, Victor's craving for dominance and control, and Billy's pride and faith in information all serve to cage each character. This scene offers a potent thematic remark on the nature of power struggles. It illustrates how these conflicts are frequently recursive rather than linear. Every effort to obtain the upper hand merely changes the conflict's terrain, opening up new points of vulnerability and counterattack. The illusion of control through knowledge, the conviction that one can foresee and influence results if one knows enough, is represented by the private investigator. That delusion is dispelled by Victor's extortion, which shows that knowledge is useless against enormous, coercive power. Furthermore, Adam's abandoned strategy exemplifies the tragedy of reason, which is that the most sensible and frequently the most resilient course of action is usually abandoned in the midst of battle, where pride, honor, and emotion are more powerful than ruthless reasoning. Together, the three components provide a dismal yet powerful portrait of human conflict, a self-destructive cycle in which the means of self-defense frequently end up being the means of our own downfall and where defiance of reason is the last step on the road to unavoidable disaster. There are no heroes in this cycle, just performers doing their assigned parts in a tragedy they created, with every action leading to an equal and opposite reaction and a downward spiral toward an unavoidably disastrous end.